you're going to want to catch up with what John has to say here. Before I get into that, I want to show you this website. This is the Voice of Freedom website. Now, if you go to vofhq.com and go over to the fourth tab, which says Criminal Trial, that one there. Now, if you click on that, up comes this page, which holds for you the Durham Report, all 316 pages. You might want to take a bit of a closer look at certain sections of this after we've had our little chat with John tonight. I can tell you that it's going to be pretty interesting. And I think you will find most of what John has to say. Well, let me just say this. The Durham Report opens up some very interesting and undeniable areas of fact that have been denied by the trolls, the media, and everybody else for the last 6 years or more. He has delved into every part of the investigation into the Russian collusion scandal and has been able to find exactly where it started, exactly who was involved, and exactly how everything related to it played out throughout the interagencies. And the interagencies is the part that we're probably particularly interested in. So I started by asking John whether or not he thought that the Durham Report, which I urge you to go and download from vofhq.com, I asked John whether or not he felt the Durham Report might have any implications or could raise questions for Australians.
Carl, how are you? Good afternoon. Thanks for coming aboard the Baybird. Durham Report, mate. It's a mind-blowing document, mate, and it has now confirmed nearly everything and more that we've known. Those of us have been following closely all of this illegal activity against President Trump now for 3 or 4 years. We now it's all been laid bare, but there are big implications for Australia, in my opinion. Big implications.
Would those implications start with Alexander Downer? Because my memory of this whole shit show, is all we can really call it, regarding Donald Trump, is a conversation between Alexander Downer and George Papadopoulos in a bar in England, and from there the information has been disseminated back through, I can only guess, intelligence or political channels back to the USA, and from there conflated into well, all things anti-Trump, thrown up also at the same time as the Steele dossier. I think that Alexander Downer has some questions to answer. Would I be fair in asking that?
Oh, you're right on the money, Carl. Look, where did all of the Russian collusion, hoax and lie, where did it all originally start from? Well, it started with Alexander Downer, and it arose out of a conversation that he had with George Papadopoulos, and all been spelt out, all been set out and documented by George Papadopoulos in his published book. So we know what happened there. Now, Alexander Downer then, by going and taking this information, all this false information back through the Five Eyes, the intelligence agencies, both in Australia and Great Britain. They're all part of the one family, the intelligence agencies called Five Eyes. And that hoax, that was the start of the beginnings of the illegal takedown of a duly elected president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and that's where that originally all started from, yes.
The Australian Federal Police have listed on their website a very tight affiliation with the Five Eyes organisation. For people not familiar with Five Eyes, that is the intelligence organisations, police and intelligence organisations from 5 leading countries: Australia, the US, Canada, New Zealand and the UK. There have been various different stories about whether Five Eyes is now Three Eyes or not. That's by the by. At the time, Five Eyes was Five Eyes, and the Australian Federal Police affiliation with that group continues, according to the website today. The Australian agencies listed on the AFP website in association with the AFP, working with the Five Eyes organisations, are some of the leading departments in Australia: the Department of Immigration, Homeland Security, Border Force, quite a number of organisations you would expect to be interacting here. However, they would have been taking advice from their American colleagues in the FBI, the DEA, who are named partners in the Five Eyes organisation from the American side. Now, let's give the Australian people the benefit of the doubt for a moment. They are receiving Five Eyes information from whom they believe are trusted partners. Where is the responsibility on the Australian intelligence or investigative side to verify that information coming from a trusted Five Eyes partner? Did they just accept it, or did they look into it? Did they examine it? Did they find anything that made them think, oh, there's nothing here, or that there is something here? And if so, wouldn't that be based on erroneous information we now can prove erroneous through the Durham Report? So our AFP essentially has been infiltrated by the same nefarious organisation running the US Justice Department, the intelligence agencies, quite a number of them, and importantly the FBI in America. This is a shocking state of affairs for Australian.
Yes. Look, let's consider this, brother. Let's consider this and try and distill this, right? The John Durham Report now is laid bare. There's no argument over this. This guy has done a magnificent report that has been hailed as a truly independent and thorough report from both sides of politics. You got me?
Yeah.
So now he's laid bare, right, how institutionally corrupt, right, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the CIA, and just as important, the United States Department of Justice. You got me?
Yeah.
So he's laid bare. He's saying he's evidence that they have fabricated evidence. They've consistently lied to judges so that they can get surveillance orders, and they then, that we now know, they signed letters to say that, 50 of them to say that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation and so on. I mean, the entire institutions Durham has laid bare are rotten to the core, and those are the Central Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and the United States Department of Justice. So, that's our starting point. We now know that. Then when you look at the community that the Australian Justice Department, we're talking Attorney General's Department, right, Commonwealth Department of Public Prosecutions and all the rest of them, when you look at the community that the Australian Federal Police and the various state jurisdictions, right, of the Queensland Police Force and New South Wales, when you look at the community, the interwoven community that all of these our Australian institutions are in and part of, up cheek by jowl with these now provable rotten, corrupt institutions that are in America, law enforcement, etc., right? You've got to ask yourself the questions. Has the Australian law enforcement institutions, have they been infected? Do we have a criminal infection inside of our law enforcement, inside of our state police forces? Do we have an infection with the Australian Federal Police? And also, do we have any infection within the Attorney General's Department, the Commonwealth Department of Public Prosecutions, etc.? Now, these are very, very heavy-duty questions. And when you start looking at some of the evidence here in Australia, right, look, I'm not speaking out of school when I say that within the freedom movement there are now dozens and dozens and dozens of us who have, and how all of us have been dealt with by the police and the court systems. And we know it's rotten. We know already on the streets. I mean, I personally was not even allowed to give my defence but in a magistrate's court. He ran out the court. He wouldn't allow me to give a defence. And I was convicted on the basis of offering no defence. I can go through dozens and dozens of other examples of where the Australian Federal Police are out of control. I mean, look, in Canberra, they were pointing weaponry at us, frequency-based weaponry. I mean, not only at us at the protest itself, but also at Epoch, at the camp. We've got many other examples, many of where these police forces have been engaged in what can only be described as psyops. I mean, that we now know with the Durham Report that the Federal Bureau of Investigations engaged in manufactured evidence, and they engaged in psyops, provable psyop, institutionally against an elected president of the United States, President Trump. So the question then begs, would the Australian law enforcement agencies conduct psyops here in Australia? They're big questions to be asked, and we're going to dig a lot more further on that. Many people in the freedom movement already know some of the answers to this.
This is one of the biggest questions arising out of the year so far, particularly for Queenslanders. There have been 11 state-sanctioned shootings of people so far this year. Queensland is highly represented. How do we as a community push back? How do we ask questions of the AFP? We don't have a special prosecutor like John Durham. We do have something similar, the likes of a royal commission, but that's usually run by a justice who is appointed by the government. How do we, the people, start asking the right questions of our Attorney General to get the answers, because we know they're not going to give them to us willingly? How do we push back and get the answers to the questions you've just posed us? Where do we begin the fight?
Well, that's a tough question, Carl. I mean, look, in America, if that was done against any man on this planet apart from President Trump, who's now proven to be one tough customer, one very tough and very durable customer, and he has survived it, but he's caught them all. You got me. Now, we don't have a Trump here in Australia, and anyone that stands up against this utterly rotten and corrupt machine, law enforcement machine, as you've just indicated, we've seen some very, very questionable fatalities on that front. And so, people have a right. People have a right to feel defensive. People have a right to feel a little bit nervous around this, right? But we got to get to the truth. We have to get to the. If anything is going to be done at all, we got to at least get to the truth, and that's going to be a tough gig, mate.
Can pressure be brought to bear on the Australian Attorney General's office to get potentially any paperwork from the time Alexander Downer was employed by the government at the time? You've got to think that this has come through government circles. There must be some paper trail, do you think?
One would think so. We don't know. Any and all efforts. I don't think there's one single pathway, that's going to cure all this. But I think, every effort should be made to claw back, what evidence is out there, what information is out there, so that we can, do our own and satisfy our own research here in Australia. But the John Durham report, mate, has opened up some huge allegations, institutional allegations against the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Justice. You have a look how close. Our institutions work with all of these institutions. Have a look, they work cheek by jowl. I think there's a high chance of infection. I myself and many others in the freedom movement have witnessed how out of control and how unaccountable the courts are, the police are, and the Attorney General's department is. I mean, you know, what President Trump has proven, what he has proven is that there is no law and order for the many people in America. There's no law and order. They can do whatever they like. You get me? And they will never be held to account. It's the same in Australia. It's the same in Australia.
I was going to say there's one law for us, and then there's no law for them in Australia.
Correct.
You know, we are probably not quite as far down the path as America being lawless as such yet. But we, the people, have no way of enforcing A, common sense, B, gaining justice when justice is clearly required. And I will use the death of the 95-year-old dementia sufferer in Cooma at the hands, well, not at the hands of the police officer that fired the taser, but certainly the firing of the taser was instrumental in bringing her death on. The people were rightly outraged at the time. This will take time to get to court. The police will protect one of their own. I doubt there'll be anything like a murder charge. I doubt there'll be a second-degree murder charge, if you like, in American terms, or a manslaughter charge. Death by grievous bodily harm, something like that. I don't expect there to be a big charge, and in fact they will probably come out with some kind of bullshit procedure that he followed this, he did that, he followed our procedures. So while this happened, it's tragic. The police force as a whole now needs to rethink the way that it, you know, deals with these sorts of patients and da-da-da-da-da. But this guy's going to get off. Now the public won't like that. That's not justice.
No. Look, you know, we're becoming very, very seeing example after example of how police and government officials and others within the club get off scot-free or get off with a slap on the wrist, whilst, you know, old grannies and, you know, people just trying to live their lives getting smashed and beaten up and fined with horrendous fines for just trying to open up a gym or operate their local business. I mean, you know, we've seen outrageous weaponisation of law enforcement in this country against the people of Australia. It's been outrageous, and we've suffered greatly at the hands of some of these law enforcement officers. I'll repeat, and I've already said this previously. There's been other research out there by other switched on people and other reports out there. There's a huge drug problem, widespread drug problem, a chemical drug problem inside all of the Australian police forces, Queensland included, up here in sunny Queensland, but all of them have a major drug problem. Look at their police union. They're so weak. They're so weak in protecting their members, right? They've abandoned their members. You've got a huge drug problem in amongst the officers trying to get through the day and trying to handle the stressors of the job. But every time, I mean, look at how many hours per day they sit in these police cars, surrounded by electronics, surrounded by all these high frequencies being pumped day and night with all these frequencies, radio communications and computing and everything else. The whole car's full of them. Now, I'm telling you now, mate, the police officers, any police officer in Australia who comes to Como John and says, I've got something to be fearful from you, I'm telling you, you're wrong. You've got nothing to be fearful from me. None whatsoever. Go and look in your own backyard, mate. Go and look at your own corrupt police union, the way they've sold you out, your way you've all got that jabbed. I don't know how many you're up to now, but you're now carrying a very serious jab injury, and you're being surrounded by radio frequencies, being poisoned. I mean, why do you think you are rocking up to a protest and you're all pumped out of your minds wanting to bash us? Why? Because they've pumped us up with frequencies, you silly bastards. We ain't your enemy, mate. We are not. I can tell you now. But if you don't clean this infection that's inside of the Queensland Police Service and all these other state police services, and also the Australian Federal Police, who once were a very honourable organisation, the Australian Federal Police. They used to be affiliated to the Canberra Trades Hall. They had 2 delegates to my council down there, and I had a great working relationship. Well, I can't tell you how bitter and how disappointed I am that after now 30-odd bloody years, the Assistant Police Commissioner, Colin Winchester, who was a bloody top bloke, mate, who was executed with 2 bullets to the back of his head inside of his driveway in Canberra, and 30 years later, no killer has ever been found. Another bloody alleged killer was charged and convicted. David Harold Eastman, he done 20 years in jail, got out, given $1 million and given a non-disclosure agreement to shut his mouth. But still to this day, Australia's highest-ranking police officer was murdered in his driveway, and still no one has ever been held accountable. And you telling me that the police in this country don't get involved in psyops?
I'm starting to be a little bit concerned. I travel around a lot of states and watch a bit of TV in those states, and happen to see the odd TV or radio commercial, particularly in the car, you hear them a lot, for police recruiting in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland predominantly. Now, I wonder about the mindset of a young person, or even somebody of middle age who's applying to become a police officer today. I wonder about their mindset, because to my way of thinking, the respect that the police have had through the vast majority of my life, from the vast majority of the community, has been eroded almost totally, and I think irreparably, during the last 3 to 4 years. What is the mindset of someone applying to become a police officer today? Are they already geared up, ready to accept the mantra, "We are the power, you will do what we say"? And surely we have good police inside the ranks of everywhere. Why aren't these police doing their duty and arresting the officers who are putting out illegal orders, who are making illegal decisions, are unlawful decisions? I understand it would be difficult for a lowly police officer to stand up and fight a senior sergeant. But I also, and I've had this conversation with a young police woman who's getting out of the force after 2 years. She doesn't like it. It's not what she went in there to do or to be. Now, her biggest problem with the force is that if you do find something wrong somewhere, you don't know who to take it to. She's seen it. She's seen corruption in the ranks, but she doesn't know who to take it to, because if she takes it to the wrong person, then she could wind up in a whole heap of shit too. So, so the good police are just saying, "I'm going to get out." We need to get these people together, because they are obviously of a moral persuasion when it comes to the decisions they make in their professional duty. They're the kind of people that we want.
Yeah, look, Carl, I've worked in many big organisations in my life. Now, when you have a big organisation that has great values and good leadership, what happens is this: is at the recruitment end, if the wrong person is recruited, right, at that end, if a mistake is made and they come in and then their values and their conduct does not fit the organisational expectations, then corrective action is taken to correct that person and bring them into compliance, into line, and to make them a valuable employee, right? Or they go, or they just say, "Look, sorry, let's cut ties, goodbye, you don't fit." right? Now, when you have an organisation that is, rotten, that is corrupt, okay, and it holds those values, what happens is that when you recruit and any good people, any decent, honest, good people, when they come into the organisation, they just don't last. They don't last because the organisation does not want those values and that that decency within their ranks. They don't want it, so they expel you. They do it quietly. They do it in all sorts of nice ways, but they do it. In some cases they bribe you, but it's also been known. I mean, there are police forces around the world. I mean, Italy, America, Chicago, where good cops have been shot. They've been shot, and which is why I raised the question about the Assistant Police Commissioner in Canberra, and him being executed. I knew Colin Winchester. I knew him from Trades Hall Council. He was a bloody good cop, and I wish there was more of him in the ranks of the AFP. Now, he was executed. He was murdered. That's all out in the public. Why? Why was he murdered, and who fucking did it, and why after 30 years has the killer not been fucking caught? That's my question.
So the AFP certainly gone to sleep on that one, we'd have to say. We are very concerned about their close association to the Five Eyes Agreement and all of the, as you put it, infected agencies involved from the American side of that agreement. I think we could also safely assume that the infection is broader than just America. I think we can assume that it is deeply into Canada, the UK, New Zealand and Australia. How do we push forward? So what is our plan? Do we start sending letters to the Attorney General asking for details on Downer's placement at that time and any communications that were
Carl,
sent?
I think that, at this stage, the Durham Report is literally only been released for a couple of weeks. We don't... very first thing I would say to all your audience out there, is wrap your mind around it. Wrap your mind around not just what he said, but the implications of it. Go to the AFP website, have a look at the weaving together of law enforcement, of judicial systems, and how they've got this like a family. And I mean, if you have the one group, the one pond of law enforcement, and someone comes and does a big shit in the punch, I mean, you get me.
Yeah, not good.
It's not good. I mean, we've all got to drink out of that punch bowl. And if you've got an utterly corrupt at its highest levels, the FBI at its highest levels, right, rotten to the core, and they come and drop a big corrupt, piece of shit in our punch bowl. You get me?
Yep.
What are the implications of that? Because we're all drinking from that. And if shit information, shit intel, political intel, and all this sort of stuff, and if it's also been laid bare that they interfered in a presidential election, right? The law enforcement tried to take down a United States president, duly elected, and Australia, early days, at its infancy through Alexander Downer, were the ones who started it off. This is dynamite. This is dynamite.
John, thanks for joining us on the Voice of Freedom
Thanks, Carl.
tonight, mate. It's thank you for having us on the boat. You've got a beautiful little outlook here and a lovely little place to sit out and catch the breeze, a few rays on a summer's morning, and trying to stay warm out here on a cold winter's morning, I imagine, could be a bit of fun too. But thanks for having us on board.
Pleasure.
Well, there you go, the man himself, the gentle pirate, let's call him. Great bloke, John, and we had a great long chat today on the boat. That was only the part of it that we could show you, but he raises some very good points, and I commend to you at every opportunity, please, folks, go and have a look at the Durham Report. You can find it on the Voice of Freedom webpage, vofhq.com. If you scroll down to page 59 of that report, you will find this little piece that is just one. That is the interview of the Australian diplomats. On the 2nd of August 2016, 2 days after opening Crossfire Hurricane, Strock and Supervisory Special Agent 1 met in London with the Australian diplomats to assess and clarify exactly what had been said by Papadopoulos in May and provided to the US government in July. In preparation for their interview, Strock, and we all know who he is, Peter Strock, and Supervisory Special Agent 1 sought the assistance of the FBI's Assistant Legal Attaché in London. Primary FBI responsibilities in London include, among other things, collaboration and information sharing with British intelligence. In the interview with the office, he pointed out the inherent importance of sharing information with the British intelligence service that related to potential Russian intelligence activity in the United Kingdom. Thus, the UK ALAT-1 briefed the British intelligence service about we'll go down to the next page, Papadopoulos' allegations involving possible Russian influence in the Trump campaign. Given the nature of the allegations and the speed with which Strock and Supervisory Special Agent 1 needed his assistance, UK ALAT-1 assumed that the FBI's interview of the Australian diplomats was exceptionally critical. They also believed that the Crossfire Hurricane investigators likely were in possession of compelling facts beyond what UK ALAT-1 understood from the substance of Papadopoulos' claims in paragraph 5. You'll see paragraph 5 above if you read, or might be below. Nevertheless, UK ALAT-1's independent impression of the predication for the investigation was echoed by Supervisory Special Agent 1 in a link exchange with UK ALAT-1, during which the predication was referred to as thin. Okay. They also recalled Strock making a comment in the taxi on their way to the Australian High Commission to the effect that there's nothing to this, but we have to run it to ground. These exchanges with Supervisory Special Agent 1 and Strock resonated with UK ALAT because in sharing the Papadopoulos information with his British intelligence service 1 counterparts at the time, they expressed real skepticism about the motivations and reliability of Papadopoulos. UK ALAT-1 told the office that British intelligence services did not assess the information about the Russians and Trump attributed to Papadopoulos to be particularly valuable intelligence. Indeed, he told the FBI's Inspection Division investigators that the British could not believe Papadopoulos' bar conversation was all there was, and they were convinced the FBI must have more information that it was holding back. So the British were under the impression that Strock, the FBI guy, had his shit in a pile. Strock made it quite clear in a conversation that there's nothing to this. It's where he says it, apparently. Nothing to this, but we have to run it to ground. Of course, we know this conversation took place, when did we say? In May, I think, is when the meeting happened. And UK was advised. However, the Australian government didn't tell the US about it until July. Okay, so interesting. How, if the UK government felt the way that it did, or the British Intel Services felt the way it did about the information that Papadopoulos had received coming from Downer, why is it was pushed so hard in the following months? That's my first question. I would also want to share with you another website. This one is also a fairly interesting one to go and have a look at. This is the Five Eyes Law Enforcement Group. Now, bear in mind, we're just talking about the FBI's involvement there with the case referring to Alexander Downer, George Papadopoulos, leading to the Steele dossier, or alongside of the Steele dossier. Let's have a look who the Five Eyes Enforcement Group is all about. Now, the FLEG is made up of the following agencies: the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, the Australian Federal Police, the New Zealand Police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the United Kingdom National Crime Agency, the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, the US Federal Bureau of Investigation, the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement Homeland Security Investigations Division, and the UK Counter-Terrorism Policing Mob. So, from what I can see there, our Australian Federal Police, in league with the Five Eyes Enforcement Group, have been fed information that they either failed to investigate themselves or were implicit in spreading, that has come from any number of these United States bureaus, but most particularly, I suspect, that one, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now, we know that Five Eyes also involves other surveillance assets that are available to those countries. They don't advertise them on the AFP website, but we do know that other agencies like the CIA, like MI6, are heavily involved, although MI6 are identified there. CIA have a charter. That charter is not allowed to work on American soil, not allowed to work against American citizens. It seems that that's all they've been doing since at least the 60s, but, you know, it's been well, there are a lot of questions, don't you think? So the Durham Report, which you can get at vofhq.com and download for yourself, have a read. You can read the executive summary. I think you'll find that the executive summary will help you a little bit with, let me just see if I can share this with you. The executive summary will help you a little bit, give you an overview of what happened, if you like. If you want to dig into the nitty-gritties of it, then you can certainly do that. Now, like I say, it's on the website. You're more than happy just to read it on the website if you like. All 316 pages are downloaded there. You can scroll down to the table of contents and pick out the different areas that you especially like to learn about. And there are some very interesting areas, particularly the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and what they found out regarding the FBI's use of information gained from George Papadopoulos, from Alexander Downer, and associated other interesting things. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and the court in particular, has very strict rules about applying for a FISA warrant on an American citizen, for instance. And that is exactly what they were able to get against Paul Manafort. And there was one other they got one against. And it is believed that under seal, or it's alleged that under seal, there is another one that allowed them to bug Trump Tower once he'd announced he was going to run for president. I haven't seen that bit in the report, but then again, I haven't read the entire report yet. There are some interesting headings under here, the Foreign Service Intelligence Act. So you can see that there are a number of headings. The introduction here is broken down to 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D sections. And then there is sections 4, C, B, or B, C, I think D too. Yep, there's D. That's the Carter Page. They break down all the investigations and how they did that with Carter Page. They illegally used the FISA application. They lied on the application, and they knew they lied on the application. How much of this information was being sent to our AFP? And how much of it did the AFP look at and say, well, we better investigate?